We're inspired to create this series by, I guess, an online magazine article series called Queering Death, which was published in Extra online magazine. And we'll put a link for that as well. We take an intergenerational and intersectional approach to loss and grieving, living life amidst uncertainty and increasing loss. Um, and we understand what the challenges and barriers may be. um, we want to address how we empower ourselves, claim what's ours, um, and how do these principles we're exploring relate to us personally, and how can we use these conversations to build personal resilience. So Stonewall CDC is an LGBTQ older adult service organization focusing on affordable housing and home care. That being said, we serve everyone. And we are co-presenting this with Vida Pride, which is an LGBTQ plus supportive initiative of Treece Financial out of Fort Lauderdale in Florida.
I'm glad to see people on our attendees from connections with both Stonewall as well as our My Vida Pride initiative, as well as people from around the country. If you look in the chat, we have people from Mississippi, from New York, from Florida, from Miami. So this is truly nationwide, and it's great to get together today. I just wanted to kind of share a little bit. I'm one of the facilitators. I'm the program director for the Vida Pride Initiative, and happy to be here and have been coordinating it with our other panelists here today. But I just wanted to share a little bit today about the topic that it's entitled Sex, Death, and Sacred Spaces. Is that the right title? Yes, I hope so. Sex, spirituality, and sacred spaces. And, really being LGBTQ, religious trauma can be a big part of kind of our experiences, and bringing that into our mortality planning and kind of thinking about at the end. There's a lot of things we have to think about. So while we're here today, just kind of know that you're in a safe and supportive space, and that we all have permission to be our full self, be open, share what we need to, bring our queer identity, our spiritual beliefs and doubts, and our lived experience into the discussion. We hope we'll all learn from each other. Sarah Miller, who is here, is our hospice chaplain who's going to be doing our main presentation. She'll help us gain some language and tools to name like religious harm and release our shame, create space for spiritual healing so we can move forward. And also we're going to discuss ways to navigate end-of-life grief when traditional structures. In our last session, we talked a lot about the heteronormative structure of the healthcare system and the dying industry. And when that system doesn't always reflect ourselves and our values, when we feel unsafe or excluded, we'll find ways to navigate that. But I just wanted to kind of set the tone and kind of get us thinking. So everybody can just take a breath. I know I speak fast, so I was just like, blah, blah, blah. But let's kind of like center and just think about some of these prompts actively. Since we are talking about spirituality and our LGBTQ identity and how that factors into our end of life experience, whenever you felt most welcome, or on the flip side, not welcome, being your queer self in a spiritual or religious space. Another aspect we can explore is what rituals or moments have helped you feel seen during grief, loss, or big life changes. What felt right to you, what helped you, or what was missing. And then, or you could, how do you want spirituality to support you at the end of life when you or a loved one dies?
Well, I'll start off if no one else is.
You always do, Paul.
So, I actually had a white light experience. When I was in the ICU, I had my appendix had burst and I got full sepsis and was in the hospital for 4 months. And the first month I was on double intravenous antibiotics before they could break the fever. I mean, I was really, really sick. And while I was in the ICU that first night, I was arguing with the doctors because I had a do not resuscitate, and I actually had my healthcare proxy in the room enforcing the do not resuscitate. Um, And so the doctors were like, we may just need to turn the respirator on for 30 seconds and then turn it off again. And I was like, well, yeah, once it's on, who makes the decision to turn it off? What's the criteria? And they couldn't answer. So I was like, no. And they turned to my mentor and asked him, they were talking to him, asking him to, talk reason to me. And while they were talking, I rose like into the air and hovered like over their heads and watched them talk, and then went into a white light tunnel. And it was an incredibly peaceful experience. I was having a discussion about whether it was okay to die now or whether I should live. And I, decided that it was fine if I died, but if I lived, I really needed to do something important with my life, because it was actually the third time I'd almost died. I'd had full-blown AIDS, and then I'd also had open lung surgery within the 10 years before that. And then I woke up the next morning not dead. And that experience was so peaceful and so right and awesome. That's what I want again next time. So I just want to make sure that I'm preparing myself to be able to receive that experience again.
Yeah, thinking about religious traditions at the end of life and sort of spiritual practices, particularly for those of us that might feel alienated from our traditions. I think one of the things that I would love to have in my own kind of end of life journey, and something I've seen with a lot of clients I work with, is updating traditional religious ceremonies or rites of passage that can still honor lineage but don't erase queer identity. So I'm thinking about rites that can be adapted with neutral language. So, like blessing candles or reading prayers in Reformed Jewish services, which is the tradition I come from, or Irish ancestral rituals with inclusive wording. And then complementing that with, lighting candles or sharing stories, and not necessarily needing the priest or the imam to come in and read these rites to you, but your queer chosen family. I think there are so many ways to adapt tradition and traditional text in ways that feel right and true to you.
So I think at this point, we can introduce Sarah, our speaker today, or our main facilitator, and we can hand it over to you.
So I wanted to start just quick a little bit about me. If you don't know me, I'm Sarah. My wife and I live in Waco, Texas. You should go ahead and feel sorry for me because it's hot and miserable here. I have been a hospice chaplain for most of the last 11 years, and I also do some grief coaching on this side, which I also love. People ask me when they find out that I'm queer, they say, how do you reconcile being a chaplain and being gay? And in Central Texas, where I live, it's kind of a no-no to be gay and to be religious. People always assume that I'm Christian, and they usually assume that I'm like Baptist or Presbyterian. I'm not sure if that's just the area I live in, but that's what they assume. So I actually am licensed and ordained and endorsed from the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship because they endorse women and gay people. But I don't actually go to church. I work 5 days a week as a hospice chaplain, so I provide spiritual care and support to others. And then I get my own spiritual needs met through things Hannah was talking about, my own rituals that I've kind of updated from church. I spend a lot of time hiking, biking, kayaking. It's very hot where I live, so we can go paddleboarding like this weekend if we wanted to. And so I find a lot of comfort in the divine from being outside instead of being in sanctuaries. That said, all people of all faiths or no faith at all are welcome to be involved in this conversation. And I really love that we're talking about this. I have several gay patients currently, and I think all of them are atheist at this moment, and they talk frequently about what their end of life will look like. They don't want a priest or anyone to come in and say a prayer for them, but several of them want me to say a blessing. There's a book that's a book of blessings. They're all Celtic and they're beautiful, and they say things like, "May you be well, may you be at peace, may you find comfort." So there's not like a specific connection to the divine. It's just like, may you experience joy or whatever. So we're doing blessings with them. Okay, so we started this off talking about navigating death with oops, sorry, that's not true. Reclaiming queer identity at the end of life. I'm curious how, I know none of us are probably at the very end of life right now, but those of you who are on, what do you guys think about? How do you bring your full unapologetic self into this conversation? For me, I think that bringing my unapologetic self is the only way to do it. I know that a lot of people, when they're in the medical care system or having a lot of providers care for them at the end of life, they are very worried about people finding out that they're gay or they're trans or they're whatever. And they don't want to be cared for differently or have people judge them. And so it's very hard to, I think, show up unapologetically and to just say, hey, this is who I am. So if you're in a space or you're supporting someone in that space, it's helpful if you can advocate for them. I had a pelvic floor therapist several years ago that was really awful to me. So after that happened, somebody offered to advocate for me, and she called every pelvic floor therapist in a 60-mile radius and found out who was going to be the best for LGBTQ affirming people, and found this great therapist for me. And I am so thankful for that experience. I'm so thankful that somebody was willing to call all these places and ask hard questions on my behalf. So one way that you guys can do that is by calling around and asking and say, hey, this person is needing, hospice care. This person is needing this kind of provider. And, how does it feel working with LGBTQ folks? So naming and healing spiritual trauma. My wife says I'm the redemption coordinator at work. I spend a lot of time helping people find redemption and whatever that looks like for them. At the end of life, of religious harm that you've had maybe in your upbringing, like maybe you felt judged by your church community, or you were told by pastors or priests that you were not good because you're gay. A lot of those things, even if you haven't thought about them for 30 years, they come up big and strong when you're dying. And it feels pretty terrible to think about the communities that usually are the ones in the past, at least, communities, faith communities are the ones that kind of walk with you through the end of life process often. And when you're gay, that's not always a possibility. I think naming the religious harm and saying what's happened is important. And then kind of like Hannah said, like reimagine your community, create something different. John said, I've worked with a lot of people at the end of life. It's important to think of loved ones and what choices you make as to how it will affect those you love and leave behind. And Amaya said, I've never thought about this before. I think that's why I'm here. If I answer honestly, I'm not entirely sure, but I know I don't want a traditional end of life ceremony. I just want it to be my loved ones who accept my authentic self. I've never considered people would treat you different, even in death, but it makes sense. And then Hannah said, Tiana said, my queer spirituality is expressed through leather. And when I think about my end of life, I think about the ways I can incorporate those familial empowered dynamics in my care, how sensation of all kinds is engaged with clear intent. Oh my goodness. And Hannah said, as I contemplate my own mortality, I turn to art produced by queer ancestors for guidance and comfort, mindful of the legacies they have left behind. Hannah, that's so beautiful. One of the things that we talked about was just navigating death without organized religion. So I would love to hear from you guys. What would you want if you were going to not have a priest or someone come out? What would that look like? What would you want? Some examples would be like having someone give a blessing, or one of my patients, he just wanted like all of his friends to come over and drink cocktails or mocktails and tell stories about him and like tell jokes and like funny stories. And so he died like surrounded by a lot of really flamboyantly fun gay men. It was really a delightful death, actually. I've had other people that just want a few people there, and it's really important that their dog or cat or animal is there. Some people really want there to be a lot of candles lit, and they want it to feel kind of almost like a home birth. They want like a home death, and they want it to be like very, very peaceful. Some people want to pass away outside. What do you guys think? With some of the families and patients, we talk about creating rituals that reflect your values now. So like what are some things that you guys value right now? Like you said, some people like want to die alone. I've had a lot of patients wait until everyone in the house is gone except for me, and then they pass away with just me sitting there. Some of those people are very, very private. And then, some people want a huge party, celebrating while they pass over to the next life. What are some rituals that you guys have seen or you would want in your own experience? I will just let you guys think about that, because I know if someone asked me that question, I would be like, wait, I have to really think about this. It's not like you're hosting a baby shower. Hosting a death is a very, very different thing. Amaya says, curious to hear because I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of ways. A lot of people want to have some redemption at the end. They want to be forgiven, not necessarily by God or a God, but they want to be forgiven by people in their life. Patients always say, like, the only thing I want to do before I pass away, Sarah, is, have a beer with my grandson that's estranged, or I want to visit with my sister-in-law that I haven't spoken to in years. So I think there's a lot of things that are really important, just relationally, connecting with people and finding forgiveness on both asking for forgiveness and giving forgiveness before you pass away. And sometimes that's not connected to religion, but it is very much a spiritual thing to be forgiven and to forgive other people. So since a lot of us are not maybe involved in church or using a church community to help us with this, one of the things we talked about was redefine what sacred means: home, body, community, nature. So what do you guys think? Is there something sacred that you find? Like I talked about nature, I find a lot of God in nature. And when I'm outside and I can hear like leaves and I can hear ducks in the water, I go to a place with a lot of ducks. Or if I'm in my backyard and I'm just sitting in my garden, I feel a sense of calm and a sense of peace. So for honoring sacred spaces outside of church, what is a place that you guys feel calm? Maybe it's your recliner. Maybe it's a friend's house.
I've never really thought about this before, but because I've always decided that I would want to know when I was going to die. I would want to go out into the woods with a pound of pot and a bunch of mushrooms and get lost where no one could find me and stone myself to death and get eaten by animals and get back into the system as quickly as possible. But I saw a video the other day when I was doom scrolling of a family of Black women singing their matriarch out. And it was just so beautiful. It was all harmonies, and you could just see the look of ecstasy on her face as she was dying. And I might have changed my plans now.
Well, a lot of people tell me that is they not necessarily wanting to die in the woods, but they want to be like as high as possible
Yeah.
when they're growing up. I'm like, if you're on hospice, we can pretty much guarantee you will just float. David, did you have a question?
I just wanted to comment because I see a lot of commentary about, you're just talking about nature and finding spirituality or finding sacredness outside of organized religion, and many people are commenting on nature. And I see Hannah posted in the comment about thinking about the role of green burial, and that can be empowering and spiritual for folks. I live in Florida on the coast, so sacredness for me is found. I often go to the ocean and the beach, and when I make it kind of a meditative ritual or spiritual ritual to go in the water and float for about an hour, because it is really kind of like letting yourself go and go something beyond that's bigger than yourself, and just losing your identity, which I think a lot of is kind of what getting toward the end of life is like letting things go and really focusing on what's important. So ideally, I would love to just float out into the ocean and die, but I don't think that's going to happen unless by an accident. But in Florida, there's two. Hannah, you mentioned green burial. There's water cremation also, and in Florida, the only water cremation site is like within my neighborhood. And if people don't know what water cremation is, it's using like alkaline chemicals. You get put into like basically a submarine tube, with heat and chemicals and water, and your body is basically washed away down to the bone. And then the water is recycled and reconditioned to go back out into the stream, the water stream. So there's not pollution, there's not any effect on the environment. It's much cleaner than fire burial. So that's like a connection to nature, that we're not harming nature. It's really being part of nature. And when I took a tour of it, one of the person who was like, someone came in here and said, it's kind of like being unborn. You know, if you think about being born, you start from a cell and you're growing, and then water cremation kind of takes you away, which for me, it's an amazing metaphor and kind of how I want to experience it. And you could take your ashes and get them turned into rocks or stones afterwards. And I would love my friends to take stones, go to the beach, and chuck them in the ocean.
We could have a rock skipping contest with your ashes in rocks.
That would be good. I would bless one of them with my spirit, and that would be the one that would go the farthest. Yes. I've thought about this and planned it out. So
I love it.
I'm really intrigued by Tiana's comment about the leather, and I wonder, Tiana, would you be willing to just muse on that a little bit more?
And also, Tiana says she wants to be pushed into a swamp, so let's hear more about that as well. Tiana.
I don't even know if we have swamps, so I'm like in frozen over Canada, so I don't even know. But there's always like some watery, mysterious places that you could just end up. But yeah, so I'm a leather dyke, and so for me, like there are some really intense like chosen family bonds, which happens a lot in queer community, and it's kind of just like formalized through um, negotiation and sexual romantic relationships of various kinds. And so when I do my end of life planning, like with me and my leatherkin, like we're also talking about like care networks for when we become disabled, for when we become sick. We talk about like pain management through controlled pain and catharsis. Like is very similar since I've given birth to like Lamaze pain management controls, right? So like there's a lot of overlap there. And there's a lot of just like dealing with that consciously and people having like empathy for each other's experiences and helping each other through intense emotional and physical experiences. So I have a lot to draw from there. And I don't know, I want to spread the message to the rest of the leather queers, I guess. Use your powers for good deaths.
You should totally do a presentation on that. I would sign up. I'd never even heard the term leather dyke until you just said it. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to text my wife and be like, what is that? What are leather dykes? I guess
Okay,
I'm certain
you can just email me. We'll talk.
because I love that the chosen community and like you talked about chosen family and chosen kin and also like care networks of like when you are frail or when you are sick, like who's going to take care of you. Those are the things that, like it so often traditional families, that's what they do. They take care of each other. And so many queer older adults, their loved one, their um, husband or wife or significant other has already passed away. And so then, that leaves them in a really vulnerable place. So I love that idea of building community. Hannah, talk to us about the green burials.
Yeah, just so because if folks aren't familiar with what it is, as I put in the chat, it's like a natural burial where and natural I put in quotes because people's definition of that can be really different. But it's basically there's a number of options, but the undercurrent is really a burial where without embalming chemicals or non-biodegradable materials, so the body can decompose naturally and return to the earth. A lot of folks that are interested in having their remains scattered, so most kind of a lot of people in the ocean, bodies of water, mountains, that's not technically considered a green burial because of the carbon monoxide that is that is caused from traditional cremation practices. But as David mentioned, you can do things like water cremation. So you use water and alkaline solutions as an alternative instead of formaldehyde. And this is a more traditional alternative to, or a gentler alternative to traditional cremation. So there's a lot of options for more environmentally friendly ways to handle the body after death.
I love it. I know like somebody said, we may not know where we're going to be when we're dying. Like all of us probably
Yeah.
want to die at home, maybe not in an apartment that's up really high, but want to die in someplace outside of a hospital or nursing home. And um, but when those things are not an option, we can still have plans for after death, for like being the water cremation, or a lot of people I see here are being put into trees, and so then they plant all these trees with the loved one's ashes. Um, and I think it gives my patients something to think about instead of just the traditional go to a funeral home, get my casket, and some pastor that may or may not know me shows up and says a few things and reads Bible verses, and then there's Amazing Grace, and then you're on your way to lunch. I think it's a cool and it gives all people, not just queer people, straight people too, some power to talk about what they want their end of life, like their post-life, post-death situation to look like.
Can I say one thing on that,
Yeah,
Sarah, too? I
yeah.
know a lot of folks who have been maybe put off by quote unquote green burials are like, well, I want there to be a place where my family can visit me and not be amorphous, like, oh, they'll just go to the ocean. Like they want something like more physical and tangible. And what you just brought up, which is like the biodegradable tree burials, which are sometimes called living urns, or arboreal burials, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. Your body or the cremated remains are buried within a tree seed or sapling. And so you can use a biodegradable urn or that gradually releases nutrients into the soil. And so eventually a tree will grow from that, which allows there to be kind of a living, physical, tangible memorial. And some people like that as an alternative to scattering.
I'm seeing it more and more. I think it's pretty cool. One family, they liked the book called The Giving Tree. So
Yeah.
they made grandma into a tree, and then they put a bench and they inscribed like the Giving Tree. And so people go and sit and have a cup of coffee and read a book while sitting under grandma's beautiful tree branches. So I like it too. Um, I One of the things I think on our talking about this was trusting your inner knowing over external doctrine. I'm pretty obsessed with Glennon Doyle, and she talks about her inner knowing. Um, and so instead of like a lot of Christians might say like the Holy Spirit or God told me to do this or whatever. And a lot of people that are starting to say things like, well, my inner knowing. So for me, if I sit quietly and I really think like, what is the best step moving forward in whatever situation, and I give myself some space to really think, my inner knowing often tells me. So maybe I read things in the Bible and maybe I think that's a good story, or maybe I think um, that it's actually crap or whatever it is. I think it's important for all of us to read things critically, whatever scriptural text or biblical text or religious text that you're reading. It's important to think critically, and it's really important to trust your inner self. Your inner knowing really knows things. I think that when we're born, we're given a lot of wisdom and abilities. And I think we don't use them. That's one of my problems sometimes with Christians. I feel like everything goes back to what the Bible says, what the Bible says. Instead of thinking about what do you think? What does this look like in 2026 in your culture, your experience? So I encourage you guys, when you are looking at end of life religious experiences or religious texts, to be really cognizant. I really loved what Paul said in the beginning about his experience, like almost dying 3 times, and on the third time looking up and going into this white light and feeling peace and feeling calm. Like how powerful. Whenever my patients are dying, they usually look over my head, so they'll look kind of behind me, and they'll say, "Oh, it's beautiful," and I don't really know what they're seeing, but it seems really calm and peaceful. And I just think that we use religion and sometimes the spiritual texts to shame people, or to say, well, only certain people are making it to heaven, or we're saving people from hell. And I just think that it's not as that stuff isn't so important. What's important is having peace at the end of life, like Paul did, where he was like, okay, I'm going to keep living. I'm going to make it work. And then when it's time for me to go, it's time for me to go. Um, that is just my hospice chaplain thoughts, but anyone else welcome to jump in.
Hey, Sarah,
Yeah.
can so I mean, I think one of the things that's really important in a discussion like this, being that we're LGBTQ centering it, is losing agency because of families, losing agency. I mean, I have a friend who was strapped to a hospital bed because his mother refused to let him be disconnected from a ventilator. But the blog that you just wrote, the Substack was, can you like talk a little bit about that?
Let's talk a little bit about supporting people who are, what did I write about?
It
What did
was
I say?
people who get alienated or
Um, yeah,
isolated because their partner dies, and
yeah.
their grief becomes like a sort of volleyball for other people to kick around.
Boy, that's a great way to say it. Yeah, so feel free to jump in, anybody. For me, I spend a lot of time finding out like if the person has lost their loved one, and so then they're gonna have to find somebody else to be their medical power of attorney. I always want them to pick somebody that's going to honor their wishes. I do think that people they exclude the partner. So sometimes when there's a maybe two women or two men, whatever, and they're gathered, and they're grieving the loss of somebody. There's I mean, you see it with husbands and wives too in heterosexual relationships, but more often I see it with, oh, well, it wasn't her mom, so she shouldn't be grieving. Well, it is still her mother-in-law and she should be grieving. I think that realizing that queer grief is still grief is really important. And we should support people, and we should surround ourselves with people who support us and where we are. If I died, I would want I birthed my son, but I would want my wife to be able to have continued relationship with my son. I would want her to have support and love and encouragement and people to like walk with her through the death of me, but also parenting a child who's lost the mom. There's so many different ways that people um, can support each other. I think when you're thinking about like your queer friends, like your friend that was strapped to the bed because his mom wouldn't let him die. Like I wish that friend would have had a partner or a chosen kind of like what the lady said about the leather community, that like you could choose somebody to be that person for you that's going to advocate for you no matter what, no matter your sexuality, no matter who you're with. Like,
So a lot of like when we started Stonewall 11 years ago, oh my God, um, we put up Stonewall Village NYC, which is an information resource activity platform. And I was 56 at that point, and not nearly as well versed in what it means to be aging as I am now at age 67.
mm,
Um, and one of the revelations that I had, and one of the things that driving a lot of the work that we're doing now, is making sure that you don't get caught without a plan. Because getting caught without a plan, you're screwed. Like all the forces come in and make claims, um and you don't, I mean, it doesn't have to be all that expensive. It doesn't have to be all that specific, but you really need to, if you want to have control, you have to take charge before you're in crisis. You have to lay it out before you need it. So a little pitch, we're going to be doing an end of life planning um, in this series. I encourage everyone to come. We just did a clinic with the Speaker of the New York City Council. We created an information resource on our platform, which we'll send out a link to, about end of life planning. We had a webinar for the public to talk about specific LGBTQ issues in end of life planning, because there are many that are very specific to the community, especially the trans community at this point. Um, and then we had a clinic where 40 people actually walked away from a clinic. They got a 2 hour consultation with a lawyer. They walked away with an executed power of attorney, advance directive, and the disposition of remains document, and a referral to a lawyer for a will. And the relief that people were showing when they were walking out of that room. It seems like it's an awful thing to take on and an awful thing to like have to think about, but in fact, it's very freeing when you just face it and get it done. So that's, I would say, part of having control is
Is having
making
a plan.
you set it up.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Paul. When I'm meeting a new family, like a new patient that's queer, I always say, like, who do you want to be there when you're dying? Who's making decisions? Does that person understand everything that you want? And, right down to what happens after you pass away. Do you want your friends and family to be able to come and see your body before we take you off to a funeral home? And making a plan makes it so much easier. So much about death is unexpected. You don't really know when you're going to be in pain or when you're going to be sleeping all the time. But we do know we are all going to die. Fact, right? It's all going to happen. And so we can plan that it eventually will happen. And I think the more people plan, the more peaceful they feel about the unknowns, because we really can't control the unknowns. Um, Practical guides to supporting others. I love that. So we were talking about leaving concrete ways to show up for your queer loved ones. I recommend that you just offer to go with people. So if my friend, like if Hannah's wife died, I would offer to go with Hannah to the funeral home, and I would offer to do all of the things or take part of the list and do it for her. I would also offer to be with her when she had to make decisions. Sometimes, like the going to the funeral home or like those decisions that happen after the person passes away, it's very overwhelming. How many death certificates do you need? How many of this do you need? It's a lot. And so just going with somebody and like, or even I've gone and just sat in the car and I'll just say, like, I'll be in the car drinking coffee. If you need me, I'm out here. And people will say, you have no idea how much more peace I felt knowing that you were in the car, that I could just come out and get you. So sometimes I'm not even making decisions or helping them make decisions. I'm just literally being outside, knowing that I'm available. And then I'm like, okay, let's go get a drink and cheers to the fact that you just did something really hard. You just picked out a casket or you just picked out the burial spot or whatever it is that you did. Those things are not natural. Like it's natural to make a registry for your baby's birth or a wedding registry or a vacation registry, but people don't really make a death registry. They don't make a plan for here are all the things I want it to look like. And so I think that's one of the ways that you could really show up for your queer friends. Hannah, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that because I feel like in these conversations we so often talk about, I mean, it's incredibly important to have, advanced directives, DNRs, healthcare proxies. These are all essential tools. I want to just say explicitly that, their power really depends on awareness and enforcement. So you can have all of these things documented, but really making sure you and whoever you've identified as your proxy understand your state and country's laws about patient rights, decision making, medical consent, and then being as explicit as possible. Of course, we can't anticipate every single thing that may befall of us, but ambiguous statements and documents can be manipulated and they can be ignored. So using as precise of language as possible is like very, very, very important. And updating it regularly, like situations change, outdated documents can be overlooked or dismissed. And so not to add more overwhelm, of course, get this get this stuff done, but make sure that you're in conversation with whoever your proxy is or whoever you're identifying to make sure that they're empowered to actually advocate on your behalf. Because I have unfortunately seen with not just queer clients, but many other folks, cisgender and straight folks as well, that they thought they had their paperwork in order and then it was not respected in a medical setting because the language is too ambiguous or easily contestable. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
I love it. I had one last thought. I think it's really important to have a gatekeeper in each death. So if you have one person that can say, like, for example, when a pastor comes in and says, oh, God, need another angel in heaven or some other crap that you don't want to hear, you have someone that's maybe not in the family but can stand outside and say, oh, that wasn't helpful. Or I have a family right now that the daughter is trans. And so the mom wants everyone to use the daughter's chosen name, not their dead name. And so they've identified somebody to be like the gatekeeper in that situation. So whenever anyone uses the child's incorrect name, it's not up to the mom who's dying to say, you're saying my kid's name wrong. It's the rest of us are like, oh, that's not what she goes by now. And for queer couples, I find sometimes the families or the doctors, people walk in and they immediately look to the family member instead of the spouse. And so that infuriates me to no end. I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. The spouse is making decisions, the life partner, the lover. This is who the person has decided. It's not going to be mom or your sister or your daughter that just showed up after 20 years of being gone. It's going to be who you've chosen. So I agree with you, Hannah. Being really clear and specific and making sure things are updated is really important.
Can I add one thing too? So my background is actually doing a lot of this internationally, and I don't know if we have any folks on this call from, and it's okay if you don't want to say so explicitly, from outside of the United States or Canada, because navigating these things are just so different based on different countries' laws, and there's a lot of really, really smart tactics and folks, deaf workers that work in places where either LGBTQ identity is criminalized or same-sex partnership um, is not legal to sort of get around some hoops and challenges. So I can put my email in the chat if folks aren't comfortable kind of saying so now. If you're from, if you're from a country or a place where that is the case, and I can follow up with specific resources because some of this may not translate.
Hannah, that's so helpful.